For a while now, there's been rumors that the Turkish government helped ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Well, now the evidence is in, and we're much closer to a final judgment. So let me tell you about that. The Business Insider writes, NATO member Turkey has long been accused by experts, Kurds, and even Joe Biden of enabling ISIS by turning a blind eye to the vast smuggling networks of weapons and fighters during the ongoing Syrian war. Now, that's one element of it. And if it turns out that people were making money on the border and the Turkish government was turning a blind eye to it, well, that would be bad. That would be really bad. But it's a different level if they actually cooperated with ISIS in the first place. Now we have further evidence on that. Original reporting from The Guardian and Business Insider explains. A U.S.-led raid on the compound housing the Islamic State's chief financial officer produced evidence that Turkish officials directly dealt with ranking ISIS members. Uh-oh, that's not good. Now, more evidence. Documents and flash drives seized during the Sayaf raid reportedly revealed links so clear and, quote, undeniable between Turkey and ISIS that they could end up having profound policy implications for the relationship between us and Ankara, senior Western official familiar with the captured intelligence told The Guardian. So that is also fairly weighty and important. Now, more. The move by the ruling AKP party, that's Erdogan's party, was apparently part of the ongoing attempts to trigger the downfall of Syrian President Bashar Assad's regime. Now, let's pause there to say that, okay, for some folks, you can understand why Turkey would be motivated to go in that direction. They're against Assad's government. Assad was a dictator in Syria. He's Shia. The Turks are Sunni. So these are old battles, and we understand. And remember also that here in the United States, a lot of people pushed for help, including military help, to the rebels fighting against Assad. Some of those rebels turned out to be ISIS. So perhaps the U.S., or at least some forces, including right-wing forces in America, would have made the same mistake. So that is also fair to point out. Now, at the same time, the level of cooperation here seems to be a little bit more detailed. Now, we go to a former ISIS member that talked to Newsweek. ISIS commanders told us to fear nothing at all because there was full cooperation with the Turks. ISIS saw the Turkish army as its ally, especially when it came to attacking the Kurds in Syria. Now, not only was the Turkish government against Bashar Assad government in Syria, but they were also against the Kurds in Syria and oftentimes in Iraq. So if ISIS was fighting their two enemies, they might have considered them to be an ally of sorts. Now, that's, of course, a terrible mistake, because once you make any kind of deal with radical fundamentalists like that, it's going to blow up on you. And it has in this case as well. The Business Insider says, but as alleged arrangements progressed, Turkey allowed the group to establish a major presence within the country and create a huge problem for itself. Then Jonathan Schanzer, who is a former counterterrorism analyst for the U.S., says, you have a lot of people now that are invested in the business of extremism in Turkey. If you start to challenge that, it raises significant questions of whether the militants, their benefactors, and other war profiteers would tolerate the crackdown. Now, again, here in the U.S., we have our own war profiteers, and they're considered very legitimate, and they sell a lot of weapons. And do they also push politicians into further and further war? Absolutely. But here in this case, once people started making profit off of the relationships that they had set up with ISIS, well, they didn't want to let that profit go. That leads to even more and deeper ties. And a Western diplomat, speaking to the Wall Street Journal in February, expressed a similar sentiment. Turkey's trapped now. It created a monster and doesn't know how to deal with it. And in fact, that monster recently did a terrorist attack within Turkey, killing 32 in the south in a town bordering Syria. So now ISIS is within Turkey, and it has turned on Turkey as it has turned on everybody. I think Saudi Arabia sent a lot of funding to those rebels, some of whom turned out to be ISIS. ISIS has an even bigger presence within Saudi Arabia. I don't think ISIS can come anywhere near toppling the Turkish government, although they could do horrible terrorist attacks as they have already. The Saudi government is a little different. I think they're in more grave danger in this issue. But it appears that both governments did work with ISIS in some capacity throughout this time. Now, Turkey realizes that was a mistake, and they explain here finally in the Business Insider that Ankara had begun to address the problem in earnest, arresting 500 suspected extremists over the past 6 months as they crossed the border and raiding the homes of others, when an ISIS-affiliated suicide bomber killed 32 activists in Turkey's southeast on July 20th. Well, hopefully that is not too little or too late. But on the issue of whether the Turkish government at some point cooperated with some elements of ISIS, it appears we do have our final judgment, which is that it certainly appears so.